Hey guys, Brian Castro from Better Chess Training, and I'm going to be starting off a new series for the next few weeks. I am playing on a chess team, an online chess team for the 45-45 League. I'll put a link in the description to the league's website, but basically we play nice long games of 45 minutes with a 45-second increment, so we get some decent games where we have a chance to think. And what I'd like to do for the next few weeks, I am on a team called Scorching Ice, and I'm going to be highlighting some of the most instructive games and positions from our team. So hopefully it'll give my teammates a little motivation to play well, as well as hopefully have some fun with it. So this is a position for my round one game. And what you can see here is that I am up material. I'm up a piece for 2 pawns. So I'm up about a pawn's worth. However, positionally, I think my advantage is greater. And in today's video, we're going to highlight the principles and the method of winning a game where you have a material advantage. Okay, in this particular position, my opponent has just played a3, and my idea here is that I want to get my queen active and try to simplify the position, or somehow make his good pieces, which would be his knight and his queen, as active pieces, try to trade those off somehow. So I start out with queen to a8, and it's pretty much forced to trade it. If he makes a move like queen to b5, then I can trap his queen. So he trades, queen takes a8, then I play rook takes a8, and then he plays g3 to try to prevent my knight from hopping on to f4, going to d3, which would be very nice. And I think, what is the natural idea here, which is to attack this weakness. Now, what you'll note here is because he played e3, he can't really advance the b pawn anymore without it being captured. So I play rook to b8, and then he plays rook to d2 to defend. That's actually better than if he played rook to b1, because now eventually, once I double on this file, there would be potential weaknesses because of the pin on this pawn. Okay, after rook to d2, I play bishop to d6. This has a couple purposes. One is to try to trade here, because I'm up material. Often it's helpful to trade down into a simpler position. When you do this, though, you want to make sure that your position is safe, that you're not trading off a good piece of yours for maybe an inactive piece of your opponent. So you don't want to just blindly trade, but you want to trade when it's advantageous to you. And that brings us up to the next point, is that right now this knight is attacking c4. Because I want to move this rook over to the b file, I need to get rid of this knight. Now he wants to keep this knight because it's fairly active, so he plays knight to g4, and then I'm able to double here. So he has to put his other rook on the second rank here to protect. So now I've got 2 attackers and 2 defenders, and this kind of brings up the next phase of this game. When you have a position like this where you have a material advantage, one key is not to rush, but the other thing is you need to create I guess more imbalances or other weaknesses in your opponent's position in order to attack. And we'll see that in a little bit. But the idea, though, is that often one weakness isn't enough to win a game. Because in this particular case, even though I'm up material, if you can imagine, this bishop isn't really doing anything offensively, and it's going to be difficult for me to bring pieces in here to attack this pawn. Okay, and so he can hopefully maintain the status quo. Although I guess I could bring my knight around here as well. But the point being is that I have to somehow create another weakness in this position. So I start off with h5. So the idea here is that I don't mind trading these knights, because that will just accentuate the advantage I have in material. He plays knight to e3, which is pretty much forced, and I just take that knight off. He takes back with the pawn. If you notice, if he took back with the rook, then I can win a pawn. So he takes back with the f pawn. Now, here's part of my idea here is that besides having the extra material, I also have um, some open lines here. So one thing you want to make sure is that when you are ahead in material that you do not become too passive. You do want to make sure your position is safe and you want to prevent your opponent's counterplay, but you want to try to do it in an active way. So moving my rook here to the fourth rank helps me to do that. Now it could shift along here as you'll see. Okay, he plays e4 to kind of cut down some of my options. And here's what I'm talking about creating another weakness, is I play h4. Okay, now if you see here, if he were to take, which is one idea, then I could do a few things. I could just go ahead and attack this pawn, or I could even get my um, bishop a little more active over here, and we'll see a variation of that in a little bit. Now, what my opponent tries to do is he tries to close the position, okay, by playing g4. And this would be good for him, and this is where I made a couple decisions that were very important in this game. So what I do here is, now notice that he might try to make a move like e4 at some point to shut out my bishop. So I actually get my bishop out of that potential by moving it over here. I do this with tempo because I'm attacking his bishop. His bishop, if he wants to save the b pawn, has to move it to c2, which he does. And this next move, I was very pleased with once I played it, was to play h3. Okay, and so you see what it does here. For one thing, it is a little bit isolated, meaning it could become weak potentially. However, what it does is it prevents the white h-pawn from advancing. Let's just go back a second. Let's say I made a move like bishop to g5. Then if you can imagine, he could play his pawn here, and now it's going to be very difficult to break through because my dark square bishop doesn't have any targets over here, and he's closed off this position to some extent. Now I might be able to break through here, but now that entails a little more risk. So if we go back, by pushing my h-pawn to h3, this pawn becomes very weak right away, and you can see now my rook can swing over. Okay, so my opponent tries to block off my rook, and you can see here it's kind of it's going to be temporary because I have the ability to break here with my pawns. So I do a little preventative maintenance. Again, you need to, the idea here is not to just play move by move. I mean, you do have to adjust to what your opponent does, but you want to kind of have a game plan about what you're going to do. So my idea here is that eventually I want to play f6 to try to disrupt this pawn structure here. So this would leave the e6 pawn weak. So I move my rook from the 8th rank to the 6th rank to protect it. My opponent, so one thing, a move my opponent avoided would be something like this, attacking the bishop because of this pin here, okay, which would just lose more material. So he moves king to f1. So now his rook is free to move there, but I go ahead and I attack anyway. Okay, he takes on f6. And again, my rook is protecting, so he's not going to be able to take it here. And I take back with the g-pawn. So now you can see this rank, or this rank is now open again for my rook to attack this pawn. And you can see here, because of the positioning and the way my bishop is dominating some of these dark squares, that he has a hard time bringing his rooks over to attack here, or his king. Okay? He plays rook to e4, attacking my my bishop, and I play e5. He takes on e5, I take back. Now, a couple things here. He actually blundered here and actually had a mouse slip, which is one of the dangers. So he actually resigned on his next move. But let me show you what might happen here. If, for example, he took the c4 pawn, which I was expecting, I would just take the b pawn. And now these two pawns become very weak, and he still has this weakness here. Now, if he tried something like just checking me here, it's just simple, because once I get up to the 3rd rank, there are no more safe checks, and I'm going to be winning this pawn and eventually working on these two pawns, and should be fairly easy to win. But let's go back here. Um, some other options, if he goes back to the second rank to try to protect this pawn, here my position, I'm in total control because all of my weaknesses are covered, or you can't take the time to protect my weakness or protect I'm sorry, attack my weaknesses, but I will go ahead and I will be bringing my king in. Okay, and you can see he really can't do much if he wants to protect. This pawn is kind of holding off. Uh, he's protecting its other pawns, and it's really the last defense for him. So he really wants to hold on to that. And I can't really attack it right away, but the idea is he's got all these other weaknesses that eventually he could shuffle his rook, for example. I'm just moving it there for an example. I could even do something like taking the d file, or I could just go ahead and scooch my king up here. Because you can see this pawn covers the g2 square. So again, my opponent made a mouse slip. Actually, I'll show you what he played, I guess. Here, he accidentally played rook to e3, and then I just took it, of course. But you can see here in this position, which is, he can't even take this d file because my pawn is covering the d4 square, and my bishop is covering the d2 square. So it's just very cramping for him. He's on the defensive, and my king's going to get into the game to win even more material. So I was able to win. Okay, just to sum up this game, I want to summarize a few tips on how to convert a material advantage. First off, you want to make sure that your position is safe. A lot of times doing tactical operations to win material often leaves your pieces uncoordinated. So you want to make sure that your king is safe, make sure that your own weaknesses like pawn weaknesses are covered, or that you can re-coordinate your pieces before trying to press any more of an advantage. The second part is to try to shut down any of your opponent's counterplay. So for example, sometimes you might win a material, say win a pawn, but that might open up lines for your opponent's pieces. So you want to have a plan, hopefully before you're finished winning the material, how to deal with your opponent's any type of counterplay or any type of chances that may have arisen because of that win of material. The next point, and this is illustrated in this game, is that often you need to, one weakness in your opponent's camp isn't often enough to win. You often need to take your position and try to maybe open up another front on maybe the other side of the board, or try to create more weaknesses so that your additional force will be able to attack multiple points of your opponent's weaknesses, and he will have less pieces to try to defend it. So that's kind of what happened in this game. And finally, when it comes to, advice is often given to try to simplify the position, and that definitely by trading pieces, and that definitely can be valid. But we want to make sure that when we're doing that, we're doing it so strategically that we're not trading our good pieces for our opponent's bad pieces just in order to trade down. We need to look to make sure that the trade makes sense on a positional basis, not just from a general principle of trading down. If you guys try these in your games, and let me know in the comments how it goes. But I think obviously winning material tactically is definitely a good accomplishment, but it hasn't won the game yet. Being able to convert that material advantage into a win is also important. So hopefully this will help with that. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please press the like button. And if this is the first time visiting this channel, I try to upload 2 videos a week. And my goal is to help you improve your chess, as well as share my journey as I try to improve my chess. If that sounds interesting to you, I hope you will subscribe and check out my future videos. And in the meantime, I wish you the best of luck with your chess improvement, and I hope you have a great day.